For nearly a century, the Crusaders controlled Jerusalem. From the walls of the Holy City to the castles of the coast, their kingdom seemed permanent, guarded by mailed knights, stone fortresses, and a steady flow of support from Europe. Then one man united a divided region, defeated the most powerful Christian army in the Holy Land, and reclaimed one of history's most sacred cities. His name was Saladin Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known in the West as Saladin. He was not born a king. He did not inherit a single united empire. He rose through discipline, patience, faith, and political skill until Egypt, Syria, and much of the Muslim Near East followed his banner. At Hattin, he broke the army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. At Jerusalem, he chose restraint when revenge was expected. And even among his enemies, his reputation became almost legendary. This is not only the story of a commander, it is the story of a leader who understood timing, unity, diplomacy, and the power of mercy. This is Saladin, the Sultan who defeated the Crusaders. Across desert roads, pilgrims, merchants, soldiers, and scholars all felt the consequences of his rise. Maps were redrawn, alliances were remade, and the struggle for Jerusalem entered a new age. The question was not whether Saladin could fight. The question was whether he could unite a world that had forgotten how to act together. To understand Saladin, we must first enter the world created by the First Crusade. In 1099, Crusader armies captured Jerusalem after a brutal siege, and the victory shocked the Islamic world. In the years that followed, several Crusader states were established: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Edessa. These states formed a chain of Latin Christian power along the eastern Mediterranean, protected by castles, military orders, and ports connected to Europe. But the Muslim rulers around them were divided by rival dynasties, local ambitions, religious politics, and old feuds. Egypt was ruled by the Fatimid Caliphate. Syria was contested by powerful emirs. Northern Mesopotamia had its own centers of power. At times, Muslim leaders fought each other while the Crusader states survived between them. The Franks were dangerous, but division was even more dangerous. A coordinated response required something rare: unity. By the mid-12th century, leaders such as Zengi and Nur ad-Din began pushing toward that goal, capturing Edessa and challenging Crusader confidence. But the man who would complete the work was still unknown. That would soon change. To the Crusaders, these territories were sacred achievements. To many Muslims, they were reminders of failure and disunity. Fortresses and walled cities made the Latin East difficult to break. Any future leader would need resources, legitimacy, and a vision beyond one battlefield.
Saladin was born around 1137 or 1138 in Tikrit, in modern Iraq. His family was Kurdish, and his father, Najm ad-Din Ayyub, served in the military and administration of the region. His uncle Shirkuh was a formidable soldier, a man of action whose career would shape Saladin's future. Soon after Saladin's birth, the family left Tikrit and entered the service of greater powers in Syria. The young Saladin grew up in a world of garrisons, court politics, religious learning, and constant warfare. Yet early accounts do not present him as a reckless young warrior. He was known for piety, education, and a serious temperament. In Damascus, he absorbed the culture of a major Islamic city, learning not only the use of power, but the importance of legitimacy. His name, Salah ad-Din, means righteousness of the faith, and later generations would see that name as almost prophetic. Few could have imagined that this quiet young Kurd would one day command armies from the Nile to the Euphrates. But the age of the Crusades rewarded men who could combine patience with ambition. Saladin would prove to be one of them. His family served under changing masters, and that taught him an important lesson. Survival in the medieval Near East depended on reading people as carefully as reading maps. Saladin learned when to wait, when to negotiate, and when to act. The skills that seemed quiet in youth would become powerful tools when kingdoms began to tremble.
Saladin's road to power began in Egypt.
At the time, Egypt was ruled by the Fatimid Caliphate, a wealthy but weakened state caught between internal rivalry and external pressure. Both the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem and Nur ad-Din of Syria understood that Egypt could decide the future balance of power. Nur ad-Din sent expeditions into Egypt under the command of Shirkuh. Saladin accompanied his uncle, gaining experience in diplomacy, military command, and the dangerous politics of Cairo. When Shirkuh died in 1169, Saladin was appointed vizier of Egypt. To many observers, he seemed young, cautious, and perhaps controllable. They were wrong. Saladin gradually consolidated authority, balanced rival factions, won support from soldiers and administrators, and strengthened his position step by step. In 1171, he ended the Fatimid Caliphate and aligned Egypt with the Sunni Abbasid Caliphate. After Nur ad-Din's death, Saladin expanded beyond Egypt, moving into Syria and presenting himself not merely as a warlord, but as a unifier. From this foundation, the Ayyubid Dynasty was born. Egypt transformed Saladin. It gave him command of one of the richest lands in the region, with tax revenues, ports, grain supplies, and the great city of Cairo. But it also surrounded him with rivals. Every decision required caution. If he moved too quickly, he could provoke rebellion. If he moved too slowly, enemies would close in. His genius was to advance without appearing reckless.
Saladin understood a truth that had escaped many rulers before him. Victory over the Crusader states would not come from one heroic charge. It would come from unity before victory. Egypt gave him wealth, grain, fleets, and a secure base. Damascus gave him prestige and access to Syria. Aleppo and other northern cities were harder to control, but Saladin combined military pressure, diplomacy, marriage alliances, and religious legitimacy to bring much of the region into his orbit. He improved military organization, rewarded loyal commanders, and prepared for long campaigns rather than quick raids. His public message emphasized the recovery of Jerusalem, but his strategy was patient. He knew that an army divided by politics could not defeat fortresses defended by disciplined crusaders and military orders such as the Templars and Hospitallers. So before striking the Kingdom of Jerusalem directly, he worked to make sure his own side could move as one. On the map, his realm began to surround the Crusader states from the south and east. The balance of power was changing. This is why Saladin's story is not simply a battlefield story. It is a story of statecraft. He used sermons, coinage, letters, marriages, governors, and military appointments to make distant cities feel part of a common cause. The famous slogan of this phase could be written plainly on the screen: unity before victory. Only after unity became real could Jerusalem become possible.
The road to Hattin was paved with broken trust. Saladin and the Crusader leaders sometimes made truces because both sides needed time, trade, and stability. But the frontier was volatile, and one man became a symbol of provocation: Reynold of Chatillon. From his fortress at Kerak, Reynold attacked caravans and threatened routes that Saladin considered protected under agreements. These raids angered the Muslim world and weakened the fragile peace. Saladin now had the political justification he needed to call his forces together. In 1187, he mobilized a large army drawn from Egypt, Syria, and northern Mesopotamia. The Crusader kingdom, led by King Guy of Jerusalem, faced a terrible decision: remain near the springs at Safaria and defend, or march across dry ground toward the besieged city of Tiberias. Count Raymond of Tripoli warned against the march, but pressure inside the Crusader camp was intense. The army chose to move. In the heat of July, both sides advanced toward one decisive battle. The decision was one of the great turning points of Crusader history. Heavy armor, limited water, and a long march through exposed ground placed the Latin army in danger before the main battle even began. Saladin had selected the kind of fight he wanted. He would not waste strength against stone walls. He would make the Crusaders leave safety behind.
The Battle of Hattin was fought on July 4th, 1187. Saladin did not simply attack the Crusaders head-on. He used the landscape, the climate, and the enemy's exhaustion as weapons. The Crusader army marched through dry terrain,
Desperate to reach water near the Sea of Galilee, Saladin's cavalry harassed them constantly, striking, withdrawing, and cutting off movement. By night, the Crusaders were surrounded. Fires were lit in the dry grass, smoke drifted across the battlefield, and thirst weakened men and horses alike. The next day, the Crusaders tried to break through, but the pressure was relentless. Near the twin hills known as the Horns of Hattin, their formation collapsed. King Guy of Jerusalem was captured. The relic known as the True Cross fell into Saladin's hands, a devastating symbolic loss for the Crusader kingdom. Raynald of Chatillon was put to death after the battle, remembered by chroniclers as Saladin's personal punishment for repeated violations of truce. Hattin destroyed the military power of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The road to the Holy City was open. The victory was not an accident. It was the result of planning, intelligence, mobility, and discipline. Saladin's forces used mounted archers, coordinated pressure, and control of water to turn Crusader strength into weakness. The knights were brave, but bravery could not overcome thirst, heat, smoke, and encirclement. Hattin was the moment when strategy became destiny.
After Hattin, Crusader towns and fortresses began to fall. The greatest prize was Jerusalem. For Muslims, it was the city of the Prophet's night journey and the home of the noble sanctuary. For Christians, it was the city of the crucifixion and resurrection. Its meaning was immense, and memories of 1099 still shaped every negotiation. When Saladin's forces approached, the defense was led by Balian of Ibelin. The city could not hold forever, but Balian negotiated terms. In 1187, Jerusalem surrendered. Many inhabitants were allowed to leave after paying ransom, while others were freed through charitable payments and special arrangements. Saladin did not permit the kind of uncontrolled bloodshed that had marked the Crusader capture of the city nearly 90 years earlier. Holy places were protected, and the transition was carefully managed. The Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque were restored to Muslim worship, while Christian holy places remained part of the city's sacred landscape. This peaceful surrender became one of the defining moments of Saladin's reputation. He had won the city, but he also understood the power of mercy. The contrast with 1099 mattered deeply. Instead of a city consumed by vengeance, Jerusalem became a stage for controlled power. Saladin's conduct did not mean the age was gentle, and not everyone escaped hardship, but his restraint was remembered. In a world where conquest often meant terror, he showed that mercy could be a political weapon.
The loss of Jerusalem stunned Europe and triggered the Third Crusade. Three of the most famous rulers of the age answered the call: Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire, Philip II of France, and Richard I of England, remembered as Richard the Lionheart. Frederick died before reaching the Holy Land, but Philip and Richard arrived with powerful forces. The struggle became a contest between Saladin and Richard, two leaders whose reputations would become intertwined. Richard helped capture Acre and won important victories, including the Battle of Arsuf, and later fighting near Jaffa. Saladin suffered setbacks, but he avoided the decisive defeat that could have undone everything he had built. He shadowed Richard's army, protected the interior, and refused to gamble Jerusalem on one reckless battle. Both men understood logistics as much as courage. In 1192, the Treaty of Jaffa ended the campaign. Jerusalem remained under Muslim control, while Christian pilgrims were allowed access to the holy sites. Neither side gained everything. Both leaders endured. Richard's courage and tactical skill were undeniable. Yet Saladin's achievement was to survive Richard's brilliance. He could lose a battle and still protect the larger war. He could negotiate without surrendering his central prize. The Third Crusade proved that the recovery of Jerusalem was not a temporary victory. Saladin had changed the strategic reality of the Holy Land.
The rivalry between Saladin and Richard became famous not only for war, but for stories of mutual respect. Chroniclers told of gifts, envoys, negotiations, and gestures of courtesy, including later accounts of Saladin sending fruit or physicians when Richard was ill. Some stories were embellished over time, but the larger image endured. Two powerful enemies who recognized greatness in each other.
Saladin died in Damascus in 1193, only a short time after the Third Crusade. According to historical accounts, despite ruling a vast empire, he left behind relatively little personal wealth, having given much of it to charitable causes and public needs. His dynasty continued after him, and his name remained attached to the recovery of Jerusalem, the victory at Hattin, and the ideal of a ruler who combined strategy with restraint. Saladin proved that greatness is measured not only by victories in battle, but by wisdom after victory. Next time, we follow his most famous rival, Richard the Lionheart, England's warrior king. His legacy extends beyond conquest to leadership, diplomacy, and the ideals of honor associated with his rule. Muslim writers remembered him as the liberator of Jerusalem. Many Christian writers, even while opposing him, admired his generosity and dignity. His triumph at Hattin changed the course of the Crusades, but it was his character that secured his place in history.